Hello everyone, today I will be reviewing the Stanley Parable 2. It's going to be a long one, so please sit tight. And before I do that though, I thought since I kind of took the mock apart, I would show you something else so the video may not be as boring. Real quickly, this is just an Iron Man mock. It requires two of the most recent Iron Man $10 mech set with the mostly golden Iron Man, but yeah, I found it on YouTube. The channel is called Ransom Fern. It's a relatively recent video, and if you have the money, I would highly suggest building it. And I made a few modifications myself after I built his. So yeah, it's got these stud shooters up top. I'm not gonna fire them. That's never gonna happen. Unless I already did that. I don't remember. And, yeah, it just kind of uses pieces from both sets, of which they are the same. And, it's pretty cool. It's way better than what LEGO has put out. And I'm gonna leave it on screen, but now it's time to get on to the Stanley Parable 2. Or Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. So, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe is a great game. Absolutely amazing. Could not recommend it enough. It's quite a long one, though. So, we're gonna begin with some new endings and one ending that was changed from the original. And I'm not gonna go over ones that we've already covered that haven't changed. So there's a actual story to this game, but you won't find it until completing at least a few endings of the Stanley Parable. So it's perfect to get the changed ending and the 3 new endings. So first, that changed ending, it's the video games ending. Remember when we got to go to Portal in Minecraft? Those games were changed for this new version. It's now a game called Firewatch, of which I absolutely know nothing about, and a map from Rocket League, where the narrator lets us play with the soccer balls. But the ending part where we end up in the original Half-Life 2 office is still the exact same. Nothing really changed. And yeah, that's the new game's ending. But moving on to the other endings, the new ones for this game. First, there is the elevator ending. So on the left side, like when you take the left door and you put the code in for the boss's office and you just go down the elevator, in this new 2022 version, there's actually an up button which you can go down and up repeatedly a few times until the narrator takes you to speak about making choices unexpectedly that apparently makes the story so exciting. And that's kind of the elevator ending. Second new ending is the bottom of the mind control facility, in which you kind of get up on a chair using the crouch, and then you get up on the table, and then you just walk off to the bottom of the mind control facility. Originally, that was a bug, and it was never supposed to happen in the 2013 version, but as the narrator states in this ending, they had to take advantage of it and make an ending out of it. So then they play a song quite similar to in the out of the window ending or out of bounds ending, when you pick yes and he plays a song for you. And yeah, it's there's really nothing more to it than that. But it's really cool how they turned a glitch into an ending. And finally, for new endings, you gotta take the right door, and instead of trying to go down the cargo lift, you want to do some precision platforming. Well, without jumping, obviously, because you can't jump. And try your best to get onto a little area on top of boxes below where you'll find a vent. And this is like to the left of the cargo lift. It's sort of, I guess, the platform you're on before you take the cargo lift. To the left of it, there's like a little cutoff, and under, if you look down, there will be a vent where you'll find a tape recording of the narrator, but it'll be like, psych, you didn't actually think I was a tape recording, did you? And we make him sad because apparently he thinks we thought so. It's really crazy how quickly he gets mad, or sad in this case. But after getting a couple endings or so, door 416 back in the office, which is like one of the doors just before the first choice of the game, will turn into this door called New Content. And if you go through there, which you're supposed to advance the story, you'll be taken through this little presentation of how Stanley Parable was made in 2013, and this new version is an expanded reimagining in 2022. And it's all super meta, and prepare for the new content, which after taking a bunch of elevator rides, because apparently we have to do that, we get to the new content, which is just a jump circle, which is a circle when you're in the area you can jump in, and you have a certain amount of jumps. I guess go wild if you wish. It's actually worth noting, if you were to restart the game while you were in the jump circle, you would be able to jump outside of the jump circle. And there's a secret back in that vent area where if you go past it, you'll find what is supposedly a Dark Souls reference, where a white, like completely white version of Stanley's player model will point up to a sign that appears on our screen that says, "Praise the jumping." It's really ridiculous. But moving past the jump circle, you'll find that's it, and the narrator is severely disappointed by this new content, and he'll say, "This isn't what the game was when it released in 2013, and basically he'll be disappointed, and then he'll restart the game to get back to what it was, and he'll restart the game, and when we spawn in the office, it'll be actually kind of different when we step out. There'll be this vent you're supposed to go to where the narrator tells us to come through. You can ignore it. I haven't, but I know there's some dialogue triggered if you tease him by acting like you'll ignore it. And I don't know what happens if you were to actually skip it, but going through the vent, you will find that he has this place locked away from the developers. Again, it's a very self-aware game, where he says that he has this place called the Memory Zone that's like memories of everything great about the original. And as we make our way through, we see reviews about how good the first game was, and how this next one probably won't live up to the expectations. And, well, oh boy, it gets really crazy as you see more and more reviews, but then the door is blocked by a bunch of boxes, so you have to go out and to the left downstairs to this maintenance room, which leads you to the darker reviews that he tried to repress that weren't so praising of the original game. And eventually you come across one that'll say, if they could add a skip button, that would just be great. And what you're supposed to do is he'll create a skip button. He says this sounds doable if for like the narrator is ranting for too long. He'll allow you to use the skip button to go past all of it. And he'll what you're supposed to do then is repeatedly use it. But apparently, the more and more we use the skip button, the longer the pauses are. First is like 15 seconds, next is like a minute, a day, a week. After so many times, many years have passed, and now you can get out because the door eventually disappears. The more and more you press the skip button, and now you can get out because it's all submerged, I guess, into sand. And as soon as you crawl out and begin walking, the game will restart on its own, and you'll be back in the regular office. But this time, things have changed. That new content door will be looking much snazzier, and it was made that way on purpose because the narrator wanted us to notice. And we have to go through, and this time we're taken to what's called the Stanley Parable 2 Expo, which is him basically announcing a sequel that will have the old game, new features, and it'll be awesome. And it is. There are a bunch of new things to see, things that will impact the story. And to start out, there's these figurines you need to collect, which you'll go crazy about trying to figure out what they should be named. They're just mini figures of Stanley, not like Legos like Iron Man here, but just mini figurines. And you have to collect 6 of them. He says there will be no reward, just the joy of collecting. And that's one of the new features, apparently. And there's another feature where he says, you know what the people who like this sort of game wants? To be recognized as the individual they are. And so he prepared a button that would say your name. But for the moment, it only says Jim. After pressing it a couple times, they'll be like, okay, well, you've had enough. And he'll just make it go down, like, out of the game, I guess. And, well, now, there's this achievement. Is basically, you can get this achievement by simply pulling a lever, but it's not working yet. There's this thing that happens at like the beginning of every time you boot up the game, where you'll just be told to enter the time, and after doing so twice, be it correctly or incorrectly, this words, which is apparently coming from a character who uses sliders to get information. He'll basically want information kind of about us by using sliders of random things to test us out, basically. It really, he could tell a lot about you. And this is not the narrator, by the way. He can kind of tell a lot about you by if you do put the time correctly in or not. But he'll help you get the achievement later, and he'll go radio silence for a while at some point after, like, what, 4 or 5 booting the game up 4 or 5 times. He'll go silent. But moving back to the expo, there's this thing called the Settings World Champion, which can only be achieved if you have moved all of the settings to every possible position, and then the narrator says he will add a new setting in there specifically for us, which he chooses to call Bumpscosity, even though he has no clue what it does. And yeah, there's really nothing more to that. It's just sort of something extra you can go see if you take the time to move all these settings to every possible position. And finally, the last and probably most important thing that you... Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention just now, but he did decide to keep the jump circle. He thought that was a good idea. But now the final most important thing is that he'll introduce this thing called the Bucket of Reassurance, which is a bucket that Stanley can pick up, and it'll change the endings, like all of them, including the new ones. So basically, it just created a whole bunch of new ones. And he says he thinks we need a friend, so we can choose whether or not we want to take the bucket on our adventure. And this bucket will apparently bring us sheer joy and calm for whatever reason. And let's just say you definitely have to take it to the broom closet later once you're back in the regular office. But then, once you're done seeing it all, he'll just come up with new designs of the office, and he'll decide then to use the same office design as we have now. And quickly, there are a few things I just remembered. There is this ending inside the Stanley Parable 2 Expo Hall. There is this infinite hole, as he claims it, but it turns out to not be infinite. And the more and more you fall, the shorter it becomes until it starts going back down, and you get to see a bunch of different views of Stanley. And this is not from Stanley's point of view, you're looking at him when you're in this ending, and you can choose to change from which direction, what kind of person he is. He could be like funny models, or different, like a robot Stanley, or it's really easier to do that when you get the game yourself if you plan to. Otherwise, you could just search it up on YouTube. Somebody will explain it better than I can. And the narrator will also take us through a hall where he asks us which balloon design we think is better, in which he will go with the opposite. So, warning, if there's one you do like, pick the opposite, and he will go with the opposite of that. So, finally, the last thing I remembered is that you will go upon this section where he will talk about having an epilogue that we will be able to access after some things have happened. And from there, we go to the designs. We see that he decides to go with the original office. It'll basically be what we already knew, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. And now the Stanley Parable 2 is based on. It's just the Stanley Parable packaged up with the new content and all. But now that we have the bucket and the figurines to find, we have a bunch of new endings to go through. It's going to be a very long one, as I said. But I hope you will at least stick around for some part of it. So we're going to start with the left door endings with the bucket. So first of all, actually, we're not going to start with that. We're going to start with the ones that don't require you to go to those doors. Of which there's only one. If you take the bucket and go out the window, like the one where you got the option of whether you were sick of this gag or not, it will go differently. We will start hearing the bucket speaking to us or something, and then we'll realize it's evil, and then we'll stab it. Again, this one I'm very confused about. He mentions like being possessed by some evil demon or something, which is kind of referenced also in another newer ending. So it's real funny at the same time as it is mysterious. And so now we can get to the two doors. I'm going to start with the left door endings like I did on the first Stanley Parable video. So if you take the bucket to the broom closet and you spend long enough in there, the narrator will add 2 stickers to it, which, you don't need, but it looks better with the stickers on. First, it's a sticker of a bucket, so people can tell this is a bucket if they couldn't already. And another sticker that says Property of Stanley, because it's our bucket. Oh, and it's also worth noting that on some occasions, the office, the meeting room, will be a little different. And this only works if you haven't found all the figurines yet. But it will change to be about finding those figurines, and it'll mark down the ones you already have, and it'll happen on basically once a poster shows up in the office, and then it'll basically be like that until you completely find all the figurines. But yeah, that's what's gonna happen to the office at some point in your playthrough. Moving on, if you go downstairs, there are 2 things that happen down here. One, you can find a figurine under the stairs, like basically if instead of going through the door, you were to turn right, and I guess right again, you would find a figurine under the stairs. But if you take that door, what will happen is you go kind of insane again, but this time it's because you think you have the wrong bucket. It doesn't matter if you have the decals on or not, you'll have the wrong bucket for this ending. And now, Mariella, the woman from the ending where she saw us dead. I mean, we're dead again here, but where she saw us dead because we had gone insane. She says, wow, this guy didn't have his bucket. That's very irresponsible. And she has her bucket with her because apparently everyone has their own bucket. Maybe. I don't know. It's all very confusing. And that's kind of that ending. Now, going upstairs, you can find another figurine in the executive bathroom, which is basically to the left of the stairway once you enter the boss's office. That ending, the escape pod ending, which you have to be very good and have good timing when you go through the door and quickly step out of the door into the boss's office. With this new one, you'll basically do the same thing. You won't have the narrator speaking to us. We'll just be climbing up those stairs right next to our office. But when we get to the escape pod, we put the bucket in, and this time it does launch, and it restarts the game. It was a really touching scene, as apparently we groomed it a little. I don't know. The bucket is weird. We are weird. And that's what the game is sort of getting across to us. And if you step into the office, no matter what, at what time you do it, you enter the same key. You'll say, "Wow, did the bucket really know all along?" And it'll open the fireplace for us. And you can find another figurine if you go right before you go to the elevator. And that'll be that. And then if you were to take the elevator down and up again, like in the elevator ending, it'll take us, Stanley will have organized the conference this time about the number 3, and where everyone showed up in the elevator ending that didn't have the bucket, nobody shows up in this one. Now, the museum ending is a little... Oh, who am I saying? It's very heavily changed. What am I saying? It's very heavily changed. This time, that female narrator has a museum all about buckets. And we get through this ending by going to the highest point and touching a bucket with, the interact button. And her message is kind of inverted this time, where without the bucket, she would tell us that we need to quit to save Stanley and the narrator. In this one, she tells us to let Stanley die because buckets reign supreme for some reason, or she wants buckets to reign supreme. She's weird, okay? Everyone's weird. And yeah, it's kind of the same. Now, moving on, if you were to fall to the bottom of the mind control facility, you would kind of set up stuff, which I don't know how you would get that, but you and the bucket would live together, but eventually you get disorderly because you decide that you wish to get out, but like the bucket, which we still believe is talking for some reason, is kind of like, no, it's not gonna happen, just accept that. And we choose not to, and the game will eventually restart after a bunch of dialogue. If you were to press the off button, meaning you turn off the mind control facility, you're about to get freedom, but apparently it stops because the mind control facility is sentient, apparently, and wants the bucket for itself. I'm not exaggerating about that. If you were to turn the mind control machine on, they say in this ending, instead of, we were about to turn it off, but the bucket jumped and turned it on, and we were about to throw it away in disgust. But it turned out to have a bunch of pictures of what is labeled as, and I quote, silly birds. Oh my god, it's so crazy. But this game is silly, so what am I expecting? And that would be all of the left door endings. Moving to the right door, if you were to go down the maintenance area, like in the confusion ending, you would reach what is supposed to be an intervention where the narrator's like, hey, I know I introduced the bucket for you to have as part of your adventure, but I think you've gotten too close and we can't have that. So he introduces another new character known as the Bucket Destroyer. And we're supposed to put the bucket into it, but we don't. And because there's really no function for that. And we kind of just die, and the narrator goes on a little monologue about the introduction of the Bucket Destroyer and how he wanted things to return to the way they were. Even on the way to the Bucket Destroyer, playing a line from the original game where you didn't have the bucket. And yeah, it was kind of weird. Kind of is an understatement. It was very weird. But that's what the Stanley Parable is. Now moving on, if you were to just jump, he would decide, like if you were to just go off the cargo lift, you would decide that there was no way you would allow the bucket to fall into anyone else's hands, and that this is the best way for us to stay together forever. It's very crazy. If you got the cold feet with the bucket, the narrator would tell you you could probably use the bucket to cushion your fall. Alas, you can't, and you die just the same as you did in the powerful. Now there is the games in the Zending ending is negated entirely because before we enter a door, there's a sign that says no buckets, and instead we are taken to this game show where we have to identify what is and what isn't a bucket, including buckets being buckets, buckets not being buckets, tractors being buckets, and tractors not being buckets, until apparently everything but Stanley and the narrator is a bucket. And then there's nothing, so he decides to reset everything to the way it was. Oh my. If you were to go and pick up the phone, you would be taken to the apartment, and it would instead be the story of the death of Stanley, but the narrator couldn't get him to give up the bucket until he decides, wow, I need this bucket for myself. And if you were to unplug the phone, which the narrator jokingly, as the bucket tells us to do, the narrator will say that, wow, it's a joke. You're supposed... What? Did you really think he could talk? And then he'll take us back to the two doors, and if you go to the left, as he kind of says, he'll be like, no, that was sarcasm. You're supposed to go to the right, obviously. I mean, okay. But then we'll be taken back, and when we finally go to the right, it is a much shorter distance to the phone area, which the narrator gets surprised at, and then the game restarts. Now that new vent ending, if you take the bucket in there, it'll just have a tape recording of a man who's being pursued because he feels such comfort from the bucket and he thinks people will want it. And he mentions that that evil spirit or something that was in the new version of the out of the window ending. It's just so weird, and yeah, that's kind of about it for those new endings. And but we're still not quite done. They really like to deliver. I just wanted to mention, as it occurred to me right now, I still have not gotten the baby game ending, which I know you can't with the bucket, and I just don't have the patience to do 4 hours, and I'm pretty sure it might know if we skip, like if we set the clock forward on the Switch, so that I can kind of do it without actually doing it. But and there's also, because this wasn't made on the same, I guess, engine or console that the original was made, that the serious room isn't there either. It was actually the room that was blocked off by the boxes in the memory zone. But, yeah. So I guess the next ending we should talk about logically is, I guess, the second to last, which would be the figurines ending. I told you how to get the first 4. Oh, well, kind of not. The first one you will get when you're in the Stanley Parable 2 Expo Hall. When you see the exhibit about the figurines, you'll get the first one there. Then you'll find another under the stairs, another in the executive bathroom, another opposite of the elevator, and then for the final 2, it's easier to access now. But if you were to sort of like act like you were gonna take the vent ending, and you'll find that there's boards nailed to the end, like the ending of that little platform where the vent is. You can take it to another like shelf of boxes, and you'll find the 5th figurine on top of that shelf. And the final one is in a room that is next to the 2 doors. Like when you were to go in, next to the 2 color doors, the red and blue, like the games and the Zending ending. So for that one, it does require you don't have the bucket. And what happens after you collected them all is that the game seemingly starts as new, but after you kind of get to the end of the first section of the office with door 437 being the last thing on the right, which is where you wandered to at the final stretch of the regular Confusion ending, it'll turn out that the rest of the office was kind of a projection or fake, as the narrator wanted us to go back to the memory zone and see those figurines again because he can't stop thinking about them, in which we get to collect them all over again. It's part of the game. It's not a glitch where you collect over 6. It's completely part of the game. You go through twice, first in the order you originally got them in, and he'll do a quiz at the 3rd one, and if you get it correct, he'll just say you get it correct, and the 4th one will be this pink room, and if you were to get it wrong, your 3rd one would then be the pink room, which the narrator says he does not recall, but if it's in the memory zone, it must have happened. So it definitely did not happen, but it happened. I'm confusing you for some reason. Unless you're not confused, in which case, congrats. But, yeah, it'll take the place of either the 3rd or 4th figurine you found. And when you get to the 5th figurine, he'll play you a video that he made himself, apparently, of us finding that figurine because it was so special to him. And then he'll say at the last one that this is the clearest in my mind because it happened the most recently. And then we'll be taken to a room with a TV that's basically following us as we see the TV on the screen of the TV. And then the narrator's like, let's do it in reverse order. Or, no, he's like, then the game will restart, sort of. And the narrator interrupts and is like, I'm not ready, so let's go back and do that all in reverse order. So basically, we go to the last place where we found it, then we go to our 5th figurine where he shows us the video, but now it's sped up. The pink room, or the 4th place, and then the pink room, or the 3rd figurine, and the 2nd, and the 1st, and then he'll be like, oh, I love this so much, let's see more memories, what came before this? And then it'll be the 2 doors, like, at the beginning of the game. It's like, how could you forget this? This is kind of what the game was built around, this choice. And then he's like, what came before that? And he's like, oh, yes, it was your office. And before that, and he wants to recall, he can recall something, and he's trying to remember, and he finally does, where he admits that he used to make every choice thoughtfully, but apparently at some point he grew lazy, and that's why Stanley was created, so someone would do his thinking for him. And he's like, I want to start thinking for myself again. And he's about to retire Stanley, but he's like, oh, but he was so fun. And he's like, hey, since we're in the memory zone, why not? I'll give him one more chance to go around the office. And then I'll retire him. He'll retire Stanley for good. Let's just say that'll never happen, because it's not supposed to happen. Or how else could we play the game? And so, with that, we're ready to move on to the epilogue. It requires for the epilogue that you do get, you do have to make sure you do 2 things. You have to go through the character at the beginning who tells you to set the time and use the sliders to get information about us. You have to make sure you've gone through all that, and you have to make sure that he hasn't been coming to you at the beginning before you play the game. And you have to make sure you've gotten the figurines ending, because that's what's required. But now on the menu, where it'll say begin the game, or new game, or load game, and achievements and settings and all that, and back, you'll see this new option called the epilogue. And when you do that, you'll be taken to the Sandy area many years later. You'll first see it in different... You'll first see the Sandy area in different colors to represent the passage of time, night and day. But eventually you'll come across a sinking memory zone. You'll have a bad review of the Stanley Parable 2, them announcing no more sequels gonna happen. And if you'll find the gym buttons, like the ones that say your name, and one of them, for once, will actually say Stanley. That's really nice to hear. And you'll find a bunch more figurines. But eventually you'll fall into this little office with only one cubicle, and when you go to the computer and you interact with it, you'll see the person from, or the character from the beginning who asked us to input the time, and he'll be like, hey, I'm back, and you know what? We're not ready to let this end. The narrator's problem is that he cared too much, and we decide that we are going to create new games. And what happens is, without like actually changing anything, what happens is every time you are to boot the game up after this, you will be asked to pick a ridiculous name for the Stanley Parable, and each time you boot it up, the number will advance by 1. So, we create the Stanley Parable through while we're in the epilogue, and now the menu will change to that. And when you boot it up again, it'll be Stanley Parable 4, and so on and so forth. And he decides to do us another favor. You see, another thing that you can do is go back through that whole new content stuff with the bucket. He'll have different dialogue. The narrator will have different dialogue, apparently. It's like, seeing that bucket means this must have worked when he first gets disappointed with the new content. And then we go back to the expo hall. If we were to interact with the bucket of reassurance, having the bucket of reassurance, the 2 buckets would explode. But, again, we can go back there, and this character here decides to do us a favor and give us that broken achievement that we weren't able to get in the expo hall. And when we go to get it, the lever works for us, and there's like, wait, I didn't get this working. You're not supposed to get this achievement. And then he just like rushes all off like, yeah. Here, you got this achievement, fair and square. Right. And we know the truth. But this is... we get to go back there as many times as we want after this. And, because it's kind of like all about replayability. And then that's kind of it for the game. But there's still a couple more things left for me to discuss. After you get to the 8th game, things will be entirely different. You'll be spawned in the room with a bunch of buttons that when pressed will say the number 8, like a computer-generated voice. You see, one of the achievements that doesn't go that goes unchanged in this new version is that instead of just directly typing in the code to get through to the elevator in the boss's office, if you were to type 8 times, a computer-generated voice will say 8. It's the same voice. And that actually segues to the next thing I wanted to discuss, achievements. Because, as we said, there's that whole thing where there's this broken test achievement, which we now get from the intro character. And, yeah, there are a bunch more. You get to a bunch from the original. First, there's beating the game, which is just obeying the narrator completely. Again, this one requires you don't have the bucket, because it's the freedom ending, the one where we actually get out of the mind control facility. Then there's also... there was this ending where... not this ending. There was this achievement where we were supposed to not play for 5 years? This time they've upgraded it to don't play for 10 years. So you better hope to get everything when you decide to go for this achievement, if you decide to go for this achievement. And there's a speed run, and pretty much all of the same stuff as the original. I guess with the exception of that test achievement being the new one. And there are a bunch more dialogue in this game. And you have to have definitely not picked up the bucket yet once you get back in the regular office. If you continue to ignore it, the narrator will eventually have dialogue where he's like, will Stanley ever pick up the bucket? Come on, man, pick up the bucket. And, oh boy, eventually you close the door, which doesn't stop us. We can still ignore it. It's like, pick up the bucket, Stanley. And I think that's about the end of the new dialogue. And occasionally, when you exit your office, he'll say a certain line depending on what we had the bumpscosity setting he created on. It really just affects what kind of dialogue you get. And if you take the bucket into the little hallway with room 417 and you close the two doors that surround it, which you can, you'll say, "This is our hideout," until we decide to exit. I guess the dialogue kind of changes with the bucket around. I don't know, it's supposed to be the bucket of reassurance, but not always, it would seem, in these endings. I thought it was really good. At first, I gotta be honest, when I heard this new game had more of a story than the last one, I was a little disappointed, because that's one of the things that made the Stanley Parable a great game. But when I got past it, I was like, wow, this is still just as great as ever. And because, it's all replayable, like you could just replay a bunch of those endings, you can't do the skip button or the figurines ending again. But, I mean, unless you were to delete all your progress and restart anew. But, it was a really good game. I can't say I'm mad about them changing the game's ending up. I probably would have liked to do that in the original, but I don't have it, and I probably can't get it. But, this game is still pretty good for what it is. It gave us so much new content, and it only raised the price $5. They only raised the price $5 from the original game. So I would definitely pick this up, even if you don't, usually play these sorts of games. I think it'll give you a good laugh and have something you like. Plus, again, you'll be able to jump if you restart while you're in the jump circle. And it doesn't matter if you don't have any jumps at all. It'll still work. But this game is so good, and I implore you all to please play it. Also, again, as I said, I put this Iron Man here. So, you didn't just have to see a bunch of Batman sheets on my bed. And, yeah. Iron Man approves of the Stanley Parable. If Iron Man approves, you should buy it. I swear I'm not sponsored by them. And, yeah, I'm too early into my YouTube career to have sponsors. But I hope that all of you like this review. It was certainly a long one, but I've been off for so long. So, I don't know, I guess it's my way of giving back. And, I think I'll get out of your hair now. I can't believe I've been doing this for almost an hour. But, it's good to be back again. And I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope that this is all that I remembered, and I don't have to do another Stanley Parable video in case you guys don't really like it. But, anyway, this is Sid Dowk signing off and saying have a good day.